You know, a lot of people think that the book of Job is about suffering. That is, that's its main topic. And it's really not. It's really not about suffering. For one thing, you don't get a final answer about why we suffer in the book of Job. It's really about wisdom, and it's answering the question, who is wise? And Job's suffering really creates the question that allows that discussion to go on. And of course, each of the human participants in the book of Job represent a certain take on wisdom. That is, Job, the three friends, and Elihu all have their own ideas about why Job is suffering and what Job ought to do about his suffering. So, and of course, they're all shown to be inadequate. Even Job himself, who accepts the so-called retribution theology of his friends and Elihu, that is, he too believes that you should only suffer if you're a sinner. But he knows he's not a sinner, so now he's going to go to God and charge him with injustice. And the only reason you'd have to charge God with injustice is if you thought that you should only suffer if you deserved it. So at the end, of course, God shows himself to be the only wise one. Of course, just because the book of Job is not primarily about suffering, it doesn't mean we don't learn anything about suffering from the book of Job. Indeed, we learn quite a bit. In the first place, the book of Job completely undermines the idea that we only suffer if we sin. Now, you might say, well, we all know that. Well, we don't know that because every time we personally suffer, well, at least I don't know about everybody, but at least me, my first thought is, what did I do to deserve this? And if you have that thought, then you're working with this idea that suffering's only a result of sin. And indeed, in the New Testament, John chapter 9, if you'll remember, when the disciples come across this man born blind, the first thing they say is, who sinned, this man or his parents? So it's fairly important that the book of Job is in the Bible to remind us that not all suffering is a result of sin, especially as we look at the suffering out in the world. We don't want to immediately jump to the conclusion that these people who are suffering are doing so because they're sinners. But even more importantly, we learn how to suffer from the book of Job. In that, in the book of Job, when Job suffers, he complains to God. He wants to talk to God. He rants and he rails. And God doesn't crush him for that. And we can also appeal, of course, to the lament psalms, the psalms where the suffering poet complains to God. God doesn't want us, like the wilderness generation, to complain about him to others, but he does want us to bring our pain to him. But on the other hand, that's not where God ultimately wants us to end up. He ultimately wants us to end up like Job at the end, trusting him, bowing before the mystery of suffering. We may not have an answer, but God wants us to trust him and his greater wisdom.